Good evening. Thank you for coming out here this evening. We have I'm here all day. Michael Bailey on the steer straight.
Okay.
Is that better? Can you guys hear me? Okay.
It's the computer doing that.
Okay. So he's talked to our 4th grade through 12th grade students. 2 really great presentations. I highly encourage you to ask your students what they learned today, just information provided about vaping, other drugs, really some eye-opening information. I thought I had done a lot of research on this, just trying to teach kids, but I definitely learned a lot today. He is here all the way from Nashville, Tennessee. So we appreciate him coming. I do want to give a shout out to Jill Haviger for bringing this organization to our awareness, so we were able to bring them out, and I appreciate all of her help in that. So I'm going to give her a round of applause.
People are texting me saying they can't hear on YouTube.
Okay. And I will move it over.
Thank you. Thank you so much. How's everybody doing?
Good.
All right. So, to the folks at home watching on YouTube, I appreciate you tuning in. I am so grateful that so many people came out here tonight, that I have the opportunity to talk to you, share a little bit about who I am and why I'm doing what I'm doing. And as your amazing social worker said, please talk to your students that were here today, because I'm a plethora of information. I'm a cautionary tale. I am obsessed with research and giving kids up-to-date information. But you're the parent, you're the grandparent, you're the people in these kids' lives all the time, whether it's law enforcement or clergy or educators or community leaders or older brothers, sisters. The peers that they have information, but the guardians and parents, you have that information. That commercial I just played, I've worked on that for Minute Maid orange juice. I like Tropicana, don't tell Minute Maid that, but it was an incredible commercial about the importance of parents, and parents are grandparents, parents are aunts and uncles, parents are any, trusted adult that's in a child's life. We have to have this conversation, these conversations that I'm going to share with you. I'm going to give you conversations, I'm going to offer you resources. When you came in, there's booklets on the tables. If you didn't grab them coming in, I urge you to grab them going out. Even if you're watching from home, I'm going to give you a website where you can download more information on drugs. And the more you know, the better off you are, the more equipped you are with information to find out about the dangers, especially I'll touch on pretty heavily tonight, vaping. Because so many of our kids are misinformed about vaping, so many of Americans are misinformed about vaping. And vaping sales in America have quadrupled in the year 2020, quadrupled. And a lot of that has to do with coping mechanisms and isolation and lack of connection. I'm so enthused, as I've shared all day, about Kansas and rural Kansas, how you have had kids in school live in rural parts of this state. There's parts of this country where kids still haven't been in school for a day. They're virtual learning exclusively, and that's not enough for what kids need today. We have to connect these kids. Schools across the country should be opening and should be wide open. And I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, they both stink. I am a realist, and I know what kids need, and I understand what I have to do to present the information to them so they can make better informed choices and informed decisions. One of the things I always use is this little image of a check engine light, right? And I don't know if it's ever happened to you, you're just driving along and all of a sudden that check engine light comes on. And I don't know if you had a heart attack like I did, but I went to the auto parts place and I put it on that machine and they told me what I needed and everything. So I took the check engine light seriously. But, and I drive a pretty crappy car. So, I mean, like, if you drive a real expensive car and that check engine light goes on, it could be a big expense, right? But the check engine light's going off on our kids. And we're not taking it as seriously as we do even the check engine light on our cars. So there's signs and there's things to be aware of. One of the things I do is I take calls when I'm home all the time. Sometimes when I'm on the road, I will take calls tonight. From midnight till 4 a.m., I take calls on the National Suicide Helpline. And last summer, if I talked to 3 kids under the age of 18 in a week, it was a bad week. Now I'm talking to 5 and 6 kids per night. Every single night, 17 years and younger. 9, 10, 11-year-old kids calling the National Suicide Helpline. If they're under 18, 17 years and younger, you have to have a second person on the phone. If they're under 14, law enforcement, first responders have to be involved. We are having a crisis across this country. In the 12 months that ended May of this past year, so May, previous 12 months, we had 81,000 overdose deaths in America. It was the largest number of overdose deaths in American history in any 12-month period that ended in May of 2020. When the final numbers come out for 2020, from January to December of 2020, we will have well exceeded 100,000 overdose deaths in this country. On an annual basis, we see between 40 and 60,000 suicides in this country. 2020 will have over 100,000 suicides in this country. We are in a massive crisis. Yes, COVID, coronavirus was a pandemic, okay? You see those numbers on your TV screen every night of how many people supposedly had it, how many people supposedly died from it. I don't get into a debate about virus or if they died from COVID or what the real reality or the real numbers are, but there is a pandemic, an indisputable pandemic within the pandemic with addiction and suicide and alcohol poisoning, and it's going to be worse in 2021 than it was in 2020. And our kids are suffering, our kids are losing connection, they're isolated, we have schools across this country that are not open. We have a problem. And adolescent use of alcohol, adolescent use of nicotine through cigarettes or vaping, and adolescent use of marijuana is at an all-time high in our country. A little bit about me. I've been doing this since 2007. Is there anyone here that talked to their kids since they got out of school today about the presentation? Anyone talk to your kids about the presentation? Is anyone here because they encouraged you to come? I love your kids. All right, so I share with them a story about my life and why I'm doing what I'm doing, but I ended up spending 12 years in prison. 12 years from 1995 to 2007. I unfortunately became an expert on drugs. Instead of studying drugs, I used the drugs. So it wasn't the best way to be an expert, but I used the drugs. I overdosed many times. I lost my life 4 times, brought back from the dead, clinically pronounced dead twice through an overdose, brought back from the dead. I spent 12 years in prison. I'm a drug expert. I wish I wasn't. I wish I listened to my mother when I was a kid. I would have been a pastor. If I listened to my father when I was a kid, I would have been a pilot. I would have had a much different life. But I had the life that I have. When I got out of prison in 2007, I knew what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I wanted to make sure kids didn't grow up to be me, honestly. If a kid's gonna wear handcuffs, I want him to wear it on his waist, where he's supposed to wear it, you know what I mean? Comes with a pension, right? I mean, I want you to be along. You're gonna carry handcuffs? Fine, put them right here, okay? Don't wear them where I wore them. I want you to grow up to be a teacher, to be a plumber, to be a farmer, to be whatever it is that God has destined you to be, that your parents and teachers are raising you to be. Don't travel down this path that I traveled, because so many people don't even make it. 81,000 overdose deaths that ended in May of this past year. A lot of people don't make it. This year's gonna be worse. I don't want these kids to get on this path. And when I go around the country, I go to a lot of schools and school districts. They're like, you know, we want you to talk about opioids and heroin and methamphetamine, and I do. I mention the things. But what I really talk to kids about are the 3 drugs that most people don't consider serious, that most people don't think is a problem, right? And it's the 3 drugs that 95% of every person who struggles with addiction in this country start with and begin with: alcohol, nicotine, and marijuana. My parents got divorced when I was very, very young, in the 5th grade, and I went from straight A's to D's and F's. And by the time I kept getting kicked out of the school and not expelled, but suspended, the principal encouraged my mother to have someone talk to me. And she took me down to our Catholic church, and the priest said he would counsel me, and that priest was a pedophile, and he sexually abused me for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. To deal with what I was dealing with, an older friend introduced me to cigarettes, said it would help me with my stress, right? And I started smoking cigarettes. And I was hooked on cigarettes, hooked on nicotine at the age of 11, hanging out with this older kid and his friends. Alcohol was around, I started drinking alcohol at the age of 11. By age 12, I was smoking weed with all these older kids, alcohol, nicotine, and marijuana at the age of 11 and 12. So I was taking pills that weren't prescribed for me by 15. I was smoking crack, snorting cocaine by 17, heroin at 18, methamphetamine at 19, a full-blown, out-of-control drug addict. And you see, my mother didn't raise a drug addict. My father didn't raise a drug addict. That's not what I was supposed to become. I became that because of the early introduction to those three gateway drugs, alcohol, nicotine, and marijuana, on the developing brain at the age of 11. And subsequent to the sexual abuse that stopped as I walked into high school, I suffered 4 years of physical abuse by two uncles who wanted to beat me into manhood. And I never dealt with that trauma, I never dealt with that pain, I never dealt with what was happening to me as a kid. And I had a counselor, and I had a social worker, and I had amazing teachers. I had law enforcement heroes in my life, I had military heroes in my life, I had plenty of people that I could have talked to. But I didn't talk to any of them, I kept it all to myself. The shame, the self-hatred, I kept it all to myself. And drugs became the answer, but it wasn't the answer. It just created more problems. The problems I had were still there. They were exacerbated because of the drug addiction, right? And I hid it from a lot of different people. But it festered and it became a full-blown addiction. And I ended up destroying my life. Nicotine and alcohol at the age of 11, THC, marijuana at the age of 12. And so I've interviewed over 10,000 people in prison and drug addicts across the country that have struggled with addiction. Over 10,000. And 95% of them tell me the same thing. Before the age of 18, cigarettes or nicotine, vaping, chewing tobacco, alcohol, and marijuana. Those three gateway drugs. But when I talk to people and they're like, oh, thank God it's just weed, at least it's not heroin. Or I talk to people who are off heroin and they're just, drinking. There's a new craze across this country that you can smoke marijuana and that will help you get off of heroin. There's actually people pushing the idea that marijuana is a harm reduction drug to get people off of heroin. But when I ask people what drug they started on, it's always the same three: alcohol, marijuana, and nicotine. These are the gateway drugs that put 95% of people into addiction, and those are the three drugs that kids are the least worried about, the parents are the least worried about, and they're the most socially accepted drugs, yet those are the three mind and mood altering substances that are entering our kids' brains, and we're creating the next generation of addicts. So at the age of 11, now I'm 56, 45 years of personal experience as an addict, as a prison inmate, and as someone who, for 14 years now, has gone back into the prison system, interviewed over 10,000 people, studied this, got degrees now. I had a PhD in addiction, but didn't have a piece of paper, like I got the degree in the streets, right? It didn't carry any weight. Now I went back to school to get the education so I could put it all together and help educate people. My mission in life is to prevent kids from growing up to become me. I want to be that live cautionary tale and put kids on a path. Now, I believe many people across the country look at marijuana, for instance, as something that should be legalized. The state of Oregon, I don't know if you know this, the state of Oregon just decriminalized possession of all drugs for personal use. So heroin, meth, personal use of heroin, if they catch you with heroin, they catch you with meth, they catch you with mushrooms, they catch you with weed, you're catch you with cocaine, you're not getting arrested. If it's over a certain amount, you are, but if it's for personal use. And they think that's the answer. It's a trend that's going to be pushed across this country. Marijuana legalization for recreational purposes in 22 states now. People believe that marijuana is no big deal. I'm going to show you some things for you to decide for yourself. But no matter how we look at this, whether you believe in the decriminalization of drugs, you believe in the legalization of marijuana or mushrooms or other drugs, 20 years and younger, we shouldn't allow kids to possess or use addictive substances, mind and mood altering substances, while the brain is developing. Now, we understand and we know that the brain doesn't fully develop until you're in your late 20s. My wife says for men it's 57, so I'll be there next year, but the brain won't fully develop until you're in your late 20s. But the law says 21. So at 21, you can drink alcohol. I wish it was 28, okay? We can debate that all day, but I wish kids would not even put alcohol into their body until their late 20s. But let's just go with the law, 21. If they just don't drink alcohol until 21, we could basically eliminate 60% of addiction in America because we're not introducing that developing brain to these substances. So we're creating the next generation of addicts, and I'm trying to stop that. And I'm trying to show you how to stop it in your own family. So this screen right here shares a lot of bad news, right? Where were we in 2020, okay? 50-year highest suicide even before COVID. Life expectancy had decreased 4 years in a row. Over 3 million psych drugs prescribed to children under the age of 3 years of age. 100 billion opioids. That's a reality, and people don't understand. 100 billion opioids were prescribed in 9 years, okay? From 2011 to 2020. Benzos and stimulants were at all-time highs, like Xanax, Ativan, the Allium, all-time high. The highest overdose death rate in American history. Methamphetamine and cocaine were at all-time highs. And as I was looking at this, adolescent use of marijuana and nicotine were at an all-time high. At the time, as I was studying this between, say, 2014 and 2020, alcohol use among adolescents was decreasing because nicotine through vaping devices and marijuana, those rates were increasing. Adolescent use of alcohol started to dip, but nicotine and marijuana started to climb at all-time highs. So we hit COVID last year. Where are we now post-COVID? Pretty much the same thing. Telehealth has exploded. Antidepressant medication, anti-anxiety medication for teenagers and for young kids. Alcohol sales have jumped because most states, almost every state, make liquor stores or alcohol sales necessary businesses. They were vital businesses, okay? And alcohol sales jumped more than 200% across the country. Kids were home, they weren't in school. 50% of the county jail population in this country was released over a 4-month time period because of COVID. And so we had a massive, massive problem in this country. Spring and summer kept all the kids out of the school. They're isolated, they're not connecting, and the use of nicotine and marijuana had skyrocketed even further. In fact, nicotine sales through vaping devices quadrupled in 2020. Quadrupled. And it wasn't just adults that were vaping. These are kids that are ordering these vaping products through the mail. And marijuana, I don't know if you know this, marijuana through vaping devices is as easy to get as nicotine through vaping devices. You can vape marijuana, you can vape all drugs, but now commercially we're selling products that are being shipped all across this country to children, and they can vape marijuana in a vaping device and you won't even smell it. So I'm going to talk to you about that. Child abuse reports dropped more than 25%. Because 1 out of 4 child abuse cases originate in a school. So a school counselor, a social worker, or an educator will initiate a child abuse inquiry if they suspect child abuse. But if the kids aren't in school, they're not referring those cases of child abuse. So child abuse cases dropped. Child abuse didn't drop. Child abuse cases dropped because we didn't have our kids in school. So this is the reality that we're dealing with. Now, I shared earlier with the teachers, my wife has a nickname for me. It's Danny Downer, right? She says to people, don't invite Mike to your party. Seriously. Like, there won't be a good party. He just brings all the bad news. I have a lot of bad news to bring. I really want you to understand what's taking place. I mean, I'm not trying to get you to like leave here and be in total panic, but you need to be concerned. You really, really need to be concerned. This is bad. And our media, and I don't pay attention to it like, I mean, watch Fox News for an hour, and watch CNN for an hour, and try to figure out where the truth is, right? It's somewhere in the middle. But it's bad. But no matter what news, no matter what political party, they're really not talking about this at all. And we need to talk about it. You'll see a story on suicide every once in a while. You'll hear Tucker Carlson or Laura Ingraham talk about overdoses and stuff once in a while. You're not hearing it like it needs to be heard. We're not talking about it like it needs to be talked about. And what's in the midst of all this is our children. And they're getting bad information. So, we need to educate every sector of our community, and every sector of our community needs to come together. Law enforcement heroes, educators, legislators, the government, the judiciary, everyone needs to come together. Parents and grandparents who are raising their kids need more assistance, more education, and we need, as a society, to understand that the most important part of our community, the most important part of our society is our children. They make up 25% of our population, they're 100% of our future, right? Well, we need to think about that, and we need to act on that. Every sector of our community needs to come together. About 75% of the children in this country are disconnected. They're not in school. It's destroying connection. It's contributing to a drastic isolation. In the county I live in Tennessee, 40% of the children in elementary, middle school, and high school, 40% of the children do not have Wi-Fi. 40%. Okay, that means only 60% of the kids are even on virtual learning. Some of the schools are open half-time, 3 days a week, they're on hybrid schedules. We are absolutely failing our kids. They're disconnected, more disconnected than ever before. I'm going to share a little bit about my work, and the documentary films that I've produced. I have a film coming out, it'll be out in May, about juvenile incarceration. I've interviewed all the kids on this screen. They all got long sentences for violent crimes, and every single one of them between the ages of 9 and 12 started with alcohol, nicotine, and marijuana. 9 and 12 years of age. No parent plans for this. And certainly no parent plans for this, to bury their child. No parent plans to stand over their kid's casket dead of a drug overdose. It's happening higher and more frequently than it's ever happened in America's history, and we're not doing enough about it. I'm not saying that a simple talk is going to be the answer, but simple, constant, ongoing, continuing talks is a huge, huge answer. We have to talk about what's going on. We've got to get into our kids' lives, into their thought processes. We've got to have more conversations. We've got to have many, many more conversations than we're having right now, because we are losing a generation. There's a gold standard for having that conversation. They tell parents, teenagers whose families eat dinner with their kids 5 nights a week. That's the gold standard. 5 nights a week you eat dinner with your kids. If you do, they're less likely to self-report, they're less likely to drink or use drugs or smoke. Teenagers who infrequently eat dinner with their kids, the kids are much more likely to self-report, to say that they would try drugs or they're smoking or drinking. They're more likely to do it if you don't eat dinner 5 nights a week. And the reason behind that is because kids need to hear the truth from you, from parents, from grandparents, from guardians, from role models. Kids need to hear the truth about drugs, okay, and alcohol and underage drinking and the developing brain from you. But when I was growing up, that was a little bit easier. I mean, we had different kind of TV shows, right? We had different kind of, the family dinner, you know, Ozzie and Harriet kind of thing, sitting around the dinner table. 2020, is that possible? 2021, is that possible? Well, every prevention organization advocates for the family dinner time where these conversations need to take place. I felt it couldn't happen like that in 2020, 2021, so I said, forget the family dinner time. If you can, great, but at least have the family conversation. You have to have 5 conversations a week with your kid. But in 2021, are you going to know what to say? So I sat down and I came up with an entire year of conversations. Not 5 dinners, if you could have them, great, but at least 5 conversations. And we published a book. The book is on Amazon, it's on our website. I came up with 260 conversations, which is 5 a week, 52 weeks of the year. Then I came up with something called, wait, let me stop lying. My wife came up with something called Family Field Trip. She's a lot smarter than me. 104 simple trips, simple things you can do around the community, around the home, just around town, 104 family field trips to have on the weekend, and I weave the conversation into every one of them. Over 400 conversations that you can have with your kids that will act as a preventive nature that will help enhance protective factors and reduce risk factors. That's what you want to do as kids grow up through those 9 to 17 years. You want to take risk factors and reduce them, and take protective factors and enhance them. That's what this book will do. It will help you do that by having these conversations, okay? So we published this book. It's the best, it's $20 on Amazon or on our website. It's the best $20 you'll ever spend. It's the only thing I'm pushing and selling. This book will help you learn the conversations, and only about a third of the book is about drugs. Because drugs really aren't the problem. I promise you this. I had a massive drug problem, but drugs weren't really my problem. Drugs were the symptom of my problem. Drugs were what I used to mask my problems. My problems were deep-seated. They were self-hatred. They were all this self-loathing, this trauma that I had experienced as a child. And I never dealt with the real core issues. And if we don't deal with the core issues, and we only deal with the symptom of a problem, we're never going to get rid of the problem. So that's what this book will help and you understand. Like I said, only about a third of it is about drugs. So on my website is a guide curriculum for kids called Success for Teens. It's 176 pages. You download it for free. It's right on our website at steeredstraight.org. It has 8 chapters. It starts with understanding and helping your children understand how the little things matter and how the attitude is so important. It starts to get into things like, there's no such thing as failure and how powerful your habits are, and it ends with making your dreams come true. This is a full-blown curriculum that you can download as a parent, grandparent, as a kid. It's so fun. I introduced it to all the kids, 4th through 12th grade. I tell them, I know you don't want more homework, okay? But this isn't homework, this is life work, and it's so important. This guide is on our website. It says resource for parents, but that's because I'm talking to you. It's a resource for you, it's a resource for the family, it's a free curriculum. They sell it for $30 online. We give it away on our website. This is a resource for you. I wanted to provide the booklets that are available as you walked in here. If you're watching from home, I'm going to show you how to get all the booklets downloaded to you free of charge. I wanted to share my parent guide with you, and I wanted to give you this curriculum. This curriculum will absolutely help your teenager, and I urge you to start this. If your 4th grade is more mature, start in 4th grade, but 5th and 6th grade is where this thing should really, really begin, and it will absolutely enhance their lives. It will enhance protective factors. When I came home from prison in 2007, I knew what I wanted to do. I just got out of prison. I had run something called the Scared Straight program in prison, and I wanted to talk to kids. I wanted to get to kids and share my story and encourage them to make better choices than the ones I made. So I got on the phone after I got out of prison, and I started calling some principals and superintendents. Good morning, I just got out of prison. I'd like to come talk to your children. Hello? Hello? Dave, he hung up on me. My wife was like, call another one. Good morning, I just got out of prison. I'd like to come talk. Hello? Who would want the ex-convict to come talk to kids, right? You see, I'm the one that needs to talk to them. I'm the one that needs to talk to them to tell them what happened, how it happened. I didn't think it was going to happen to me. The last thing I ever thought I would be in my life was a convict, an ex-convict, a drug addict, an ex-drug addict. This wasn't my destiny. I made my destiny by the choices and the decisions that I made. Today in the 7th through 12th grade assembly and in the 4th through 6th grade assembly, I asked the kids, raise your hand if when you grow up, you want to be a drug addict. Anybody raise your hand? Nobody raised their hand. Raise your hand if you want to be an alcoholic, homeless on the street, living in a box. Anybody under a bridge? No? Raise your hand if you want to go to prison when you get older. You're going to end up in prison. Everywhere I go, I don't care what state it is, what grade it is, no one raises their hand. No one thinks it's going to happen to them. Interviewed over 10,000 addicts and prisoners since I came home from prison in all my films and documentaries. Never once have I had an inmate tell me I knew ever since middle school this is what was going to become of my life. No one thought it was gonna happen to them. No one thinks it's gonna happen to them. I've been to 213 addiction funerals. From a suicide or an overdose, 213 personally, I've been at 213 funerals. I've never heard a parent stand in front of their kid's casket and say, ever since middle school, I knew this was gonna happen. Never heard it. Nobody thinks it's gonna happen to them. It's not gonna happen to me. It won't be my kid. Not my kid, 3 pretty dangerous words. I'm home from prison 3 years, 2010. My best friend, who lives 3 doors down from me, his 22-year-old daughter died of a heroin overdose. She was a 3rd-year student at Drexel University, straight A 4.0 GPA. How does that happen? He asked me, how does this happen? I couldn't answer him. I should have been able to answer him. I should have been able to tell him I saw it, but I didn't see it. It was right in front of me and I missed it. So I decided that I was going to make a documentary film. I was going to tell the story of this girl, Amber. I was going to go out there and I was going to say why a 4.0 GPA at one of the hardest colleges in America died of a heroin overdose. I was going to go answer the question. So I took my camera equipment and I went down to this little city next to Philadelphia called Camden, New Jersey. Don't know if you ever heard of it. I'm sure it's not on anybody's bucket list in this room, right? It's one of the most violent, drug-infested cities in America. Most beautiful people in the world, but the city's a cesspool. And I started walking down the street with my camera equipment. I looked like an idiot. And I started interviewing kids who were strung out on drugs. I said, man, tell me your story, tell me how you got here. And I started recording it, right? This was day 1. These are the 4 kids I interviewed on the first day I filmed. This girl changed my life forever. She was living in this abandoned house, and she was fully out of control, addicted to heroin. I said, I'm taking this into school to show kids about drugs. She pulled up her arm sleeve. She said, here, show kids this. I don't know how old she looks to in this picture. She's 21. 21 years of age. She died 9 months later of a heroin overdose. I interviewed her mother and her grandmother for the film. They're in the film. Kids Are Dying is the name of the film. I interviewed her mother and her grandmother. My house could have fit in their living room. You should see how this girl, you want to talk about affluence and everything a kid could possibly need or want. This girl grew up with it. Well, she's no longer with us. She's had a heroin overdose, and she walked the streets of Camden for over a year. And I interviewed her. I interviewed 137 kids in a 10-month time period. 137. 121 of them, which is 88%, 121 of them were addicted to opioids first. A dentist or a doctor prescribed Opana, Percocet, Vicodin, OxyContin. Opioid medication came before the heroin addiction for 88% of them. Now, the national accepted percentage is 80%. 80% of all heroin addicts in America abuse opioids first. That's why people say we have an opioid epidemic. No. 100% of those kids, all 137, had 3 things in common. 100% of them. Before the age of 18, they used nicotine. They either chewed tobacco, smoked tobacco, or vaped. 100% of them drank alcohol at a young age, and 100% of them consumed THC, marijuana. Every single one. Alcohol, nicotine, and marijuana. I call it the trifecta gateway. And I said, man, this is crazy. The same with me. This is nuts. So it changed the perspective. It changed the direction of my film. It changed everything. As I started continuing with other films and continuing research and going back to college, getting all these degrees, 90% of every drug and alcohol abuser, 90% of every single person these 2 heroes deal with in criminal activity, 90% of them. Alcohol and drugs, addiction is part of it. 90% of every prison inmate in this country, addiction, drugs are part of it. Only about 25% of people go to prison because of the drug crime. But 90% of people commit crime for drugs or under the influence of drugs. Legalizing drugs does not take crime away. Legalizing drugs makes addiction worse and increases crime across the board. It's irrefutable. We cannot legalize drugs and expect crime to go away. We're going to legalize drugs and increase the prison population. That's a 12-year inmate telling you that. That's a 14-year study of the criminal justice system telling you that. 90% of all drug and alcohol abusers start as a teenager, alcohol, nicotine, and marijuana before the age of 18. After I finished the movie Kids Are Dying, and I put it out there, I started having parents call me from Ohio, and a mom called me from West Virginia, and a dad called me from Texas, and another woman called me from Michigan. You should come here, you should come here. So I got in my car and I drove across the country, and I went to 30 states, and I interviewed 500 parents who buried their children to a drug overdose. 500. Some together as a couple, some single moms, single dads, 500. All 500, I asked them a question. Before the age of 18, did your son or daughter drink alcohol? And everyone said yes. Did they smoke weed? Everyone said yes. Did they smoke cigarettes, chew tobacco, or vape? Everyone said yes. 500 out of 500. I was blown away. So, I was in Colorado, interviewing a mom whose daughter died the night before graduation. She was graduating from the University of Colorado at Boulder. The night before commencement, she died of a heroin overdose. It was one of the hardest interviews I ever did. I was crying and I was messed up. And I wanted to just walk down the street and just clear my head. My cameraman followed me, and we were walking. And we came across this little store in Boulder, and it was a marijuana dispensary. And I said, what the heck is this? A head shop? He goes, head shop? Dude, how old are you? Like, come here, let me show you something. We went into this little shop. It was like Nordstrom's. It was like Lord & Taylor. Like, it was like unbelievable. We walked into this store, and marijuana had gone mainstream. Colorado had just legalized marijuana, so I stayed in Colorado for a year. And I interviewed dozens and dozens and dozens of people. I finally documented what was taking place with weed. And I made a movie about it, a documentary. I decided that this needed to be seen by everybody, so instead of selling it, instead of putting it on DVD, we stuck it on YouTube. You can watch it on YouTube, it's 54 minutes. If you think you know everything about marijuana and what's actually taking place, you should watch it. I have my own opinions, but as I say at the beginning of the movie, you make your opinion. I'm just trying to report, you decide. You decide. I wanted to show you what's going on with marijuana, and that's what I wanted to share with you tonight. When I made this movie in that dispensary, when I walked in, there was these two little vials on the counter. And the vials on the counter had a sign next to it that said liquid weed. I said to the kid behind the counter, what's liquid weed? He goes, man, now you can vape weed. Vape weed. You can vape weed? I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe where we were going. We had those vials tested. 87% pure THC liquid. This was in 2015. This kid, Sean, used that product, had a massive stroke, had a problem because of that weed. I'm trying to warn everybody, this was liquid weed. That's called marijuana. It doesn't look like marijuana, but it is defined as marijuana. It's 87% pure THC in a liquid, and you can stick it in a vape canister and vape marijuana. In 1960, the DEA started testing the potency of THC. In the cannabis plant, whether it's indica or sativa, okay, not hemp, that's a completely different animal, but in cannabis, in indica or sativa, there's about 300 molecules. There's only one that gets you high, tetrahydrocannabinol, THC. The DEA started testing it in 1960. It tested 1% potent. Somewhere around the Cheech and Chong years, okay, of the 80s, it got up to about 5 or 6%. They genetically modified marijuana plants and they increased the potency over 51 years. From 1960 to 2011, marijuana potency got to about 12%. Potent marijuana, very potent marijuana. Well, Colorado and Washington passed legalization in Colorado and Washington in 2013. And in 2 years, it went from 12 to 37%. 51 years went from 1 to 12. 2 years, it went from 12 to 37. Now this right here, this is farmers and botanists, okay, and purists, increasing the potency of marijuana. This is scientists and chemists, and a little company called Monsanto. They genetically modified this drug and turned it into a toxin, and now we have 100% concentrates in the 80s and the 90s%, and none of the states across the country have a cap on THC. All the states that have legalized marijuana have no cap on the potency of the marijuana. So no one knows what they're putting in their body, and it's completely unregulated by the federal government. In fact, it's still illegal by the federal government, but the states that have legalized it with no cap on THC and virtually no concern about kids. When a state is considering legalization of marijuana, Kansas is considering medical marijuana, your governor is considering medical marijuana, but when a state is considering marijuana, they're out there telling you, well, we want to be concerned for kids. If we make it 21, kids can't get their hands on it. How does that work with alcohol? Does that work with alcohol? So kids can't get their hands on it if you make it 21. Keep drinking, right? So no one's talking about the adolescent use that's increasing. The state with the highest vape usage among adolescents is Colorado. The state with the highest use of marijuana use is Colorado. Not a coincidence. So, it's not really the drug in and of itself that I want to explain to you. It's how the drug reacts on the brain. It's not the drug, it's how the drug reacts on the brain, the adolescent brain. And when you talk about those three drugs, and I want you to really look at differently. If there's one thing I pray happens every time I get in front of parents and educators and law enforcement heroes like this, if there's one thing I want you to take with you, I want you to look at alcohol, nicotine, and THC in a different way. I want you to look at it with a serious concern when it comes to kids. If you are an adult, and I ask the kids this, I say raise your hand if you know an adult 21 years of age and older, your parents, your grandparents, your aunts and uncles, your older friends, right? Raise your hand if you know an adult that drinks alcohol responsibly. They'll have a beer at the Chiefs game, they'll drink a glass of wine, they'll have a drink with dinner, and the kids raise their hand. Great. Raise your hand if you know an adult 21 years of age and older, they drink legally, but they need to stop because they have a problem with alcohol. And the same amount of hands go up. So just because an adult can drink alcohol legally doesn't mean they can drink alcohol responsibly, right? There's some people that need to stop drinking alcohol. Making it legal does not take that problem away for that person. So still, as adults, we need to be concerned, but my focus and concern is children. That brain's not developed at 20 years of age, even girls, okay? The brain's not developed at 20 years of age. They don't need those three drugs in it. Because think about these drugs, alcohol, nicotine, and THC. THC is a hallucinogen. Nicotine is a stimulant. And alcohol is a depressant. So many kids are using all three. You're stimulating, hallucinating, and depressing the developing adolescent brain with those three drugs that so many people don't even consider serious. Now, tobacco, nicotine, and vaping, I want to talk to you briefly, and I want to show you a little bit what's happening with marijuana. So that's my focus. This right here is the strategy of the tobacco industry. From the 60s through the 80s, this was the tobacco industry's strategy. They wanted to deny health harms, they obscured the science, they formed the largest political lobbies in Washington, and they attacked public health. But right at the core of their strategy was target kids. They actually made a movie, The Insider, about it, attacking kids and targeting kids. They said, and it was documented, if we get a 17-year-old hooked on cigarettes, hooked on nicotine, we have a smoker for life, and they're worth millions of dollars to us. That's their target, children. So that was the strategy of the big tobacco industry. In 1994, Congress held some hearings, the tobacco and cigarette hearings, 1994, April 1994. And in that hearing, there was a congressman from Oregon named Wyden, Ron Wyden. He's now a senator from Oregon. At the time, he was a congressman, and he asked a question. They had the 7 CEOs from the 7 biggest tobacco companies in America, and this congressman asked them a question. This was the question that he asked them.
Yes, do you believe nicotine is not addictive?
I believe nicotine is not addictive, yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Congressman, Cigarettes and nicotine clearly do not meet the classic definitions of addiction.
I don't believe that nicotine or our products are addictive.
I believe nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
And I too believe that nicotine.
I say, remember them? And the kids are like, no. Yeah, they weren't here. How are you gonna remember them? You weren't here in 94, none of you, right? We were, and we remember them. I don't know if you remember the hearing, but they lied to us, right? So I say to the kids, were they lying? And this generation is the smartest generation that's ever lived. They pretty much plummeted the smoking percentages among kids. Less kids smoke cigarettes than ever before in our country's history, okay? I asked them if they were lying, and all the kids say yes. Wherever I go, middle school or high school, were they lying? And the kids say yes. Well, they're lying again, and they're lying about vaping. Because the two largest cigarette companies in the world, part of the cigarette, Altria and RJ Reynolds, they're part of the number one and number two cigarette companies in the world. They're the number one and number two vaping companies in the world. How could that be? If vaping was invented to help people quit smoking, why would the tobacco industry be a part of it? You invent a product to help your customers get off of your product. No, that's a bad business model, right? It would never get bought on Shark Tank. The two largest vaping companies in the world are the two of the largest tobacco companies in the world because the tobacco industry is behind the vape. The tobacco industry invented the vape, the tobacco industry markets the vape, and they own 80% of all vaping products and companies in this country. The tobacco industry. Now, a vape, a lot of different variations, a lot of different types, a lot of different colors, a lot of different names, right? They basically all have three components in it. Three components. There's a power source, generally it's a battery. There's a reservoir, a canister where the liquid goes, or a wax pod, pre-made, will take that place. But then they have an atomizer on it. And the atomizer, what it does is it takes the liquid or the wax, whether it's nicotine, whether it's THC, whether it's a non-nicotine flavor. It takes that element and it heats it up to over 200 degrees Fahrenheit. When it does, it vaporizes, vape. And it aerosols into the respiratory system. But the problem when it goes into the respiratory system, it doesn't go in as vitamin E acetate or propylene glycol, or it doesn't go in as the flavor. It goes in as a genetically modified, changed chemical structure. And many times it goes in as a toxin, and it's entering the respiratory system, it's going into the lungs. Some of the products, like vitamin E acetate, does not come out of the lungs. Once it goes in the lungs, it crystallizes. It stays inside the lung membranes. No one's talking about this enough, but when we're talking about vaping harms and health harms, everyone's focused on the lungs, the respiratory system. That's only one part of the body that this is affecting. We're not going to see the damage long-term for 5, 10, 15 years on this generation of kids between the ages of 10 and 17 that was targeted with this product. They put it into the form of cigarettes and they market it to America. Vaping is going to save lives. We're going to get people off of cigarettes and put them on vaping devices. Okay, that was all a lie. It was a lie because what Juul did, what Altria did, what Vibe did, Vuse did, what all these companies did, was they targeted children, right? Has anyone ever seen this before? The IQOS. Anyone ever seen one before? It's crazy, right? It was the first thing that they came up with in 1999. When you smoke a cigarette, right, you put the cigarette in your mouth, you take that butane lighter and you light the cigarette. And some of the butane from the lighter is going in your lungs. Some of the burnt paper and the burnt tobacco is going in your lungs, along with a lot of other toxins and carcinogens, but butane, burnt paper, burnt tobacco. So what this device invented by Philip Morris was going to do, you were going to put the actual cigarette in the IQOS, and it was going to heat the cigarette. You were still going to smoke, but it wasn't going to be a lit cigarette. It was going to be a heated cigarette. So you didn't have no butane. There wasn't any burnt paper. There wasn't any burnt tobacco. There's still nicotine. There's still all the carcinogens, all the poisons of a cigarette, but it is, in fact, safer. It was a safer way to smoke cigarettes. Philip Morris invented this. It was before any of the vaping, but it didn't catch on. It really didn't catch on. They're their test markets, all their tests that they did across the globe, it wasn't really taken on. People, yeah, do you want a safer way to smoke cigarettes? Yes, we'll put it in this little device. They didn't like it. So they took this adaptation and turned it into flavors, flavored pens. Who's the flavor for? It's not for adults. I mean, I know some people drink mango Budweiser and lime and lemon Budweiser. I get it, you know, Four Loko, all those flavors. I get it. Some adults drink that flavored garbage, but the target was kids. This is a target for kids. The kids that say they vape, the number one thing they say all the time, 75% of the time, they like the taste. This was to target children. Most kids believe that e-cigarettes were invented to help people quit smoking. Most people believe that. Even the American Cancer Society says the exact same thing. But let me show you their official statement. Smokers who can or won't quit should be encouraged to switch to the least harmful form of tobacco product possible. American Cancer Society said if you can't or won't quit your cigarette, go on the least harmful form, which is a vape. Well, they don't even know what is the least harmful form. When that statement came out, there hadn't been a single study on vaping in America, not a single study. And it's not even a tobacco product, it's a nicotine product. So the statement in and of itself is a lie. If I have an adult friend who wants to quit smoking but can't or won't, right? 7 million people across the globe die from cigarettes. 7 million people a year. If I have a friend that can't quit smoking and asks me, should I go on a vape? I'll say, do whatever you gotta do. But if you can't quit smoking, wait till you see how hard it's gonna be to quit vaping. Because you don't smell like that cigarette. You seemingly can breathe easier and go up and down stairs because it's not affecting the respiratory system as much as a cigarette is, but the damage is subtle. The damage is elsewhere. The damage is throughout your whole body. And now you're smoking or you're vaping something that tastes good. You think you're gonna quit a vape easier than a cigarette? Absolutely not. In fact, 80% of smokers who go on a vape go back to a cigarette or stay on a vape or vape and smoke. So it's worse than ever. But I'm not saying it's impossible to quit smoking by going on a vape. I have a friend who did it, right? He went on a vape and he got off the vape and he no longer smokes. Great. 80% of the people who try it fail. They stay on both products or one or the other. But I'm not even talking about adults. I'm not even talking about adults. I'm talking about your children. Your children. Adult use is not what I'm scared of. It's a youth pandemic. And when you start vaping as a kid, your initiation increases the likelihood you will smoke a cigarette. If a kid starts vaping, they're more likely to end up on a cigarette. And guess who learned that in their 5 massive studies that they did? The tobacco industry. They found that they got kids started with vaping and they studied them, and over 3 years, most of the kids had moved on to cigarettes. The brain and the body is developing, long-term health damage is unknown, and nicotine and THC addiction is exploding with absolutely no clear way of quitting, no form of cessation. There is not a smoking cessation product in this country for kids, not one. How do we get a kid who's 12 to 14 years of age to quit nicotine when we don't even have a product for that? We don't even have a program. If you go to the CDC website, the last smoking cessation program they have on their website is dated 2002. It's 20 years old, 18 years old. We have kids that are addicted to this. In fact, I asked the 7th through 12th graders. I love 7th and 8th graders the most because they're the most honest kids in the world, right? But I asked all the kids 7th through 12th, hey, I know you guys aren't experts, right? But let me ask you a question. Raise your hand if you know a middle school or high school kid who's vaping and you really, really believe they're addicted to it. You should have seen the hands go up. It's about half of the 7th through 12th graders in this room today raised their hand that they know a kid, middle school or high school, not so much in this school, anywhere. They know a middle school or high school kid who's vaping and they think that they're addicted to it. If half of the hands that went up are accurate, it's a problem. A problem. What is a kid gonna do? On my website, I have a section that says no vape zone. It's a 17-page guide that I wrote, and I'd love you to look at it and download it. It's no charge, it's free, and there's some steps that people can take, adults can take too. There's some steps that people can take to help them get off of nicotine, dealing with the cravings. There's a thing on my website and the resources for anxiety. I wrote it for kids. It teaches kids how to develop their personal stress management program. It's a 4-step guide for anxiety. Most of the people that call us or write us to say they love it are adults, are parents. Parents aren't supposed to be stressed out anyway. It's just for kids. No, it's going to help everyone. Everything on my website is going to help anybody, but our focus is kids, right? We don't know what the long-term health damage is going to be, but it's going to be massive. What they did is they marketed all these flavors to kids. They came up with all these flavors to target children. The same thing that the tobacco industry did throughout the 70s and the 80s. And they went on their social media, and they went on videos, and they went on Snapchat, Twitter, and all this other, and they targeted teen magazines, and they targeted teen shows. And they did commercials to them from 2013 to 2017, and no one was paying attention. And in 2016, after 5 years of studies, the CDC announces that 32% of high school kids are vaping. So I say to the kids, is it higher or lower than that? What do you think they say? Higher. It's 75% have tried it. 40 to 50% are on a regular basis. That's tried it. It's double that. At the very least, it's double that. It's almost triple that. We have to understand that this is a far greater problem than the government even understands. They say 13% of middle school kids are vaping. I say to the kids, is it higher or lower? They never say lower. They always say it's higher. Now, I said earlier, and I mean this generation, smartest generation that's ever lived. Tobacco use is at its lowest point in decades. Cigarettes, cigars. The American Lung Association has actually been tracking high school smokers. I mean, think about that for a second. High school students aren't allowed to smoke legally, but they're tracking them. But anyway, look at the red line. Cigarettes have plummeted among adolescents. Juul hits the market in 2011. 2 years of marketing to them, it starts to skyrocket. In 2015, this line went straight up. Then they stopped the survey. How coincidental. 70% of their funding comes from the tobacco industry. I'm not a conspiracy theorist or anything. 70% of their funding comes from big tobacco, and they stopped this study. Just saying. So, I was screaming, I was making noise, I was begging people for help, I was going to Congress, I was doing these presentations. In 2016, Congress gave the FDA full authority to regulate the e-cigarette industry, such as the Juul. 2016. Trump comes into office, his administration, his FDA commissioner Gottlieb, 17, basically says to the e-cigarette industry, we're going to postpone approval till 2022. Congress said, go ahead and regulate the e-cigarette industry. The second largest lobbying group in Washington is still to this day big tobacco. You know who number one is? The pharmaceutical industry. So basically big tobacco's got to the FDA, 70% of their budget comes from pharmaceutical industry and big tobacco anyway, and Gottlieb pushes it off till 2022. They gave them 6 years to hook our kids. So, a lawsuit ensued, over 30, Kansas was in it. The Attorney General of Kansas was in the lawsuit. 30 state health departments and attorney generals sued, and the judge overturned it. In 2019, the judge overturned it and gave the FDA 10-month deadline. Well, the FDA went back to this e-cigarette industry and said, okay, it's out of our hands now, you got 10 months to comply. Oh wait, if it's too quick, we'll give you a 1-year extension. And if that doesn't work, we'll give you one more 1-year extension. Unbelievable. They gave them 2 extra years, nothing changed. So December of 2019, 3 months before basically COVID was really pushing schools to close, the FDA announced what they should have done all along. In the beginning, they're going to raise the age for all nicotine products to 21. Again, how does that work with alcohol? We're going to make it 21 across the board because some states were 18. So the federal government said 21 across the board. You think that's keeping it out of the hands of kids? And they were going to regulate the industry, but omit the fact that making it 21 has never worked for alcohol or cigarettes. It's a folly. The second thing that came along with this, 1 month later, January 2020, they were going to ban flavors. And that was a big thing, except it completely omitted independent companies. They weren't part of the regulation, and it completely omitted manufactured cartridges. It also completely omitted the marijuana industry. I'm sorry, they banned the flavors in the pre-manufactured cartridges, but they didn't ban the open tank systems. So in other words, if you had a flavor bottle here and a liquid bottle here, chemicals, and you could mix them together yourself, that was okay. So the open tank system sales started to skyrocket. Lung damage and respiratory disorders, high blood pressure, brain cancer, hindered brain development. When you hear about those things, you don't think of kids. You think of 80-year-olds, 70-year-olds, 60-year-old people, right? You don't think of kids, circulatory system disorders, nicotine addiction. This is all happening in 20s and 30s. I took 100 vaping cartridges and devices from middle schools in New Jersey. We went and took 100 devices from confiscated middle school students. We went to the schools, we talked to the principals, they gave us devices from middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade kids, and we had them tested. And this is my top 8 chemicals that were in those devices. Formaldehyde, diacetyl, propylene glycol. This is a problem. These are chemicals, lead and nickel. When someone says lead poisoning, I think that's one phrase that kind of wakes people up. Lead poisoning. Almost every single device has lead in it. Almost every single device is distributing lead into the body. This is how everyone in America passed away in 2018. This was the cause of death for everyone in our country. The number 1 cause of death in America is heart disease. The number 2 cause of death in America is cancer. And the number 3 cause of death in America is respiratory disorders. 80% of those top 3 causes of death is caused by cigarettes. Respiratory disorders is number 3. Now, I believe respiratory disorders by, say, 2030 is going to jump cancer, is going to jump heart disease in this country to become our number 1 cause of death in America. And I was saying this in 2018 and 2019. One of the things I said in 2019 is, we're going to need a lot of ventilators for the kids who are dying of respiratory disorders. I had no idea COVID was coming. I had no idea how short of ventilators we were in this country. We made a lot of ventilators for COVID. Those ventilators are going to be used for this generation as they get into their late 20s and early 30s, because the cause of death that's going to become the number 1 cause of death in America is going to be respiratory disorders. I'm making a prediction. I pray I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong. This right here is a 27-year-old kid, Mark. His mom gave me this picture. They blacked out his medical information right here, but this is his lung at the age of 27. They nicknamed the cause of death that he had popcorn lung. It's bronchiolitis obliterans. It's acute respiratory distress syndrome. That's how he died, 3 years of vaping. 3 years. In full transparency, he did smoke before that too. From about 19 years of age. He was a heroin user, he had an alcohol problem, but he never really experienced lung problems. He started vaping to get off of cigarettes after he got off of heroin and alcohol. He was in recovery from addiction, and he turned to a vape. You know where he turned to the vape? In the treatment center he went to beat his heroin addiction. He switched from cigarettes to vaping. 3 years later, he's dead at the age of 27. The company that his family is suing is fighting him tooth and nail. They say that their products don't cause bronchiolitis obliterans, which is what this is. So, 2019, people started dying, and they started attributing it to vaping. The CDC didn't have a name for it, so they came up with an acronym, EVALI, E-cigarette vaping associated lung injury. They came up with this name. They didn't know what caused it. They didn't know the mortality rate. They don't know how to solve it or fix it or cure it, but they got a name for it, EVALI. And the numbers are absolutely underreported. This is a Saurin, S-A-U-R-I-N, and the original purpose of this was to keep that device with no nicotine in it to people who could vape and not have vape nicotine. We tested like 30 of them, and like 22 of them had nicotine in it. They were putting nicotine in it anyway, even though it wasn't on the label. Well, wait a minute, how can they get away with that? How can they put it on the label? And who's monitoring this? Nobody's monitoring this. No one, this is a completely unregulated, even to this day, is a completely unregulated industry. I took all of those pens right there, and one of the things I worked with on a project with the DEA in New Jersey is I told them I could take any drug on earth and I could put it in a vape pen. Now, I have a pretty rare skill set, one I'm not proud of, one that got me in a lot of trouble in my life, but I could take any drug you have and I could put it in your vape pen, right? And so they took me up on the offer, and I did it. We went to this place where they had all these drugs, and we put it in these pens. I showed them how I could vape any drug on earth. I knew what this was going to happen, what this was going to do. I knew where this was going. I knew that the vape was going to become the drug delivery system for every single drug in America. And that's where we are. I'll show you that in a second. I just want to show you this. The Juul, J-U-U-L. This was the big hit, the big target to kids. This is the most used device in America. They used to sell these products, creme brulee and mint and fruit medley, to target children. This device is still the #1 device in America, but they're not selling the flavors because all the pressure coming down on them to get rid of the flavors. But that's okay. All these other companies stepped up. But the Juul, this device, was delivering these pods, and it was the most dangerous vape that there was, especially for kids, because the Juul didn't use nicotine. The Juul used something called nicotine salts. Those pods were developed nicotine salts. It's basically raw nicotine. It's 3 times the concentration of nicotine in a cigarette, up to 5 times the concentration of other vaping devices. When these kids are using this Juul and these pods that go in the Juul, they're not vaping nicotine, they're vaping nicotine salts. There's a huge difference. One of the differences that scares me that very few people except Harvard Medical School is looking at is something called the blood-brain barrier. Nicotine never crossed the blood-brain barrier, and that barrier around the brain, nicotine didn't penetrate it. When you look at all the cancers attributed to nicotine, brain cancer is at the bottom. Why? Because of that. It protected the brain from nicotine. But nicotine salts crosses the blood-brain barrier. So many times I'm dealing with families and they say their kids are absolutely hooked, or a nurse called me from a school and she's like, I had the student come in, she says she can't get off nicotine, she can't stop vaping, she wants to, but she can't. What do? I have all these things that people can do, but when we started talking about the girl varsity softball, varsity girls basketball, varsity girls soccer, now she's not playing any sports. Straight A student, B student, now she's got C's and D's. Her learning, her memory and attention, everything's been affected by this. By vaping. It's not just, a simple little thing kids are doing. It's going to affect the development of their brain and their body. And as I said to you earlier, these other companies are stepping up to jump in, to make all these different flavors. This is Tropical Mango Miley's Salt Nick. That's the new patented brand, and that's owned by Altria, the same people who are responsible for the Juul. This device right here is a Juul. It's an actual Juul. This pod right here is not a nicotine Juul pod, a nicotine salt Juul pod. It's a THC marijuana pod. It's made by a company called Cushy. They originally started in Denver, now they're in 5 different states. They make Blue Dream, Purple Punch, Monster cookies, gelato, marijuana. THC in a pod into a device, and it snaps right in the Juul. So they made their product to go into a device that snaps into the most popular cigarette nicotine device in America, the Juul. So now the kids can get the pod with THC in it, called Cushy. This is another company called Hooli, same kind of device, except it takes its own pod, but when you buy the package, they give you the charger with it, the device, and they give you the pod. And then you just reorder Hooli pods from the company. This is another one called Stizzy. This is a disposable vape product, but it's not nicotine or salts, it's THC. It's marijuana. Cute little colors, sleek little design, slips in your pocket, and you can get high and smoke marijuana. So, in a state where marijuana is still illegal like Kansas, how are we hindering law enforcement by taking probable cause away? I mean, you can smell this, and you can't smell that there's THC in this. Even canines can't hit on this. How we're tying law enforcement's hands. How you got a kid behind the wheel of a car, you don't know that they're impaired. Obviously, if they have a bong in the dash, it's probable cause. They got a needle on the seat, it's probable cause. You got this, it's a vape. How do you know what's in it? How are you gonna test what's in it? Maybe you could field test it, THC and a concentrate. I'm not really sure, but we're tying the hands of law enforcement. And all these kids have all these websites. I didn't share a lot of this with kids, I'm sharing it with you. I know there's young people here, but you're with your parents, and you're gonna have a great conversation on the way home, and I'm wanting to enlighten you anyway. But this is a website called Hail Mary Jane, and they're teaching kids how to put weed in their pods. How to put weed in a jewel pod. Because when these pods, these jewel pods, are done, they're empty, you throw them away. I don't know where all the environmentalists have been on this, but anyway, you throw these pods away. Now, this company's gonna show you, don't throw it away. We're gonna show you how to fix it. We're gonna put weed in your jewel pod. And they have a step-by-step guide with video and audio to show you how to put weed in a jewel pod. Oh, pretty much any drug on earth you can put in this jewel pod. They'll show you how to do it. This is Miley Pods, Salt Nick brand. This was in New York. This was in Connecticut. CBDs, Cala, Zilla Pods, Lush Pods, all the flavors that you could imagine. Now, if your kid can't get his jewel flavor, he can get flavored pods from over 100 different companies. This is a pen. It's called the Cloud V pen. It's $40, but the bottom is a pen. It's an actual pen. It writes, except the top is not a pen. It's an atomizer. It has cartridges that goes right in the pen. The kid can put his mouth right to the pen and vape right in the classroom, right in his room. You won't smell it because it's not one of those devices that puts that big cloud in the air. It's very sleek and very minimal, and so he can write. If a teacher thinks she sees something, she comes over and she grabs it out of his hand and writes with it. You might give the pen back to the kid because you think it's a pen. It's not a pen, it's a vape pen. This is an inhaler. Now for asthma, it looks like an inhaler for asthma, except it's delivering THC mist into the respiratory system. So now, if the kid gets caught with one of these and says it's my inhaler, is the SRO, is the security guard gonna know it's a marijuana inhaler? Here's a watch, vape watch. It's an actual watch, it functions as a watch, but underneath the watch is where your cartridge goes, and the buttons on the side is how you vape. You vape right out of here, put your wrist up to your mouth, and you can vape out of your watch. This is a Puffit. It was originally designed to deliver melatonin to people. I guess they couldn't sleep, so they're inhaling, vaping melatonin, but the company saw how much money was being made in the THC market, and they started offering different flavors and different things ordered right off their website. Kids are inhaling THC. This is a hoodie, a vape hoodie. You can design it with your own logo on it or whatever color you want, but the strings are actually how you vape. You put the vape inside and you can vape on your hoodie string. This is a dank tank. 100% top shelf THC. It's a vape device that delivers vape THC liquid into the body, 100% pure. I was putting this in my movie, and when I went to the place that made this, they wouldn't let me video, but they let me take pictures. So I took a picture of this guy. He has this Pyrex tube in his hands, and it's full of marijuana flower, right? Full of marijuana plant. They put about 200 of these in a machine into the brackets, and then this big wall comes down and connects to this side where the orange bracket is, and they blast butane or propane through this and burn through all the marijuana. But what comes out the other side is this. So that's marijuana, defined as marijuana, but it's 84%, 87%, and 94% pure. They call that butter, they call this wax, and they call this shatter. They're giving all cute names to it, like hash oil capsules, BHO, butter and earwax, and green crack wax and shatter. This is marijuana. And I ask people, did you vote yes for marijuana in your state? People say yes, but did you vote for this? Well, that's not marijuana. Oh, yeah. Yes, it is. That's what you vote for. If you legalize marijuana, even medical, okay, this is what you vote for. This is 100% THCA crystalline. It's like a rock like crack cocaine. It's 100% pure crystal THCA. It's marijuana. Doesn't look like marijuana. It's marijuana. When I saw those two vials and I saw where this was going, I was a little naive. I didn't think we would get there. I didn't think we would get here where there's hundreds of videos on YouTube showing kids how to put THC in their vape pen. And when you watch the news and you listen, I don't care if Republicans or Democrats, okay? Matt Gaetz, one of the most conservative Republicans in the country, he's one of the biggest advocates to push marijuana. People say this is a liberal issue or a Democrat issue. It's not. It's mostly, but it's not. They see the money, okay? And I'm not talking about tax money, because tax revenue does not manifest like people say it does. But when the kids, that's my concern, the kids, when the perception of harm goes down, the youth use goes up. When kids think marijuana is no big deal, when kids think it's not a dangerous drug, back in 1993, 80% of kids, 8th, 10th, and 12th grade, pretty much 80%, 75% thought marijuana was not good and was bad. Now, this was 7 years ago. Now it's down in the 30%, 20%. Perception of harm goes down, adolescent use goes up. So, this was a big confiscation of meth this past year in Australia. $210 million of crystal meth. In a liquid form, they had it in Sriracha hot sauce bottles. It was destined for LA. It wasn't in liquid because it was easier to smuggle or get in bottles, okay? It was liquid because it's going in vape pens. Crystal meth. The 5 largest confiscations of methamphetamine in American history happened in 2020. The 5 largest confiscations of meth in American history at our Mexican border happened this year, 2020. And 4 of those 5 confiscations, the meth was crystal liquid. Crystal meth liquid. It was in liquid form. This is an article from West Virginia where a couple of high school kids were rushed to the hospital because they basically overdosed in school. And when they looked at their vapes, it had heroin in it. Heroin in their vape pens. This was kids in Utah that were rushed to the hospital the same way, but it was meth in their vape pens, high school students. I don't know if you heard about these 2 brothers, 20 and 23, in Wisconsin. They were using their family farm to manufacture liquid vape. These were mason jars filled with liquid THC. They had 31,000 vape cartridges full of this liquid THC. And they had 98,000 empty pods ready to be filled. You know where all those pods came from, empty pods? They came from China. They shipped them right over to Wisconsin. These 2 brothers were operating a multi-million-dollar THC vape distribution operation in Wisconsin, and it was the biggest one of its kind. But if you think these are the only guys doing this, and this was the only operation, this is just the biggest one that they've caught so far. It's all across our country. In North Carolina, officers and health officials went out to start going to all the gas stations and the bodegas and the little convenience stores, and they started buying up all these CBD products to test them. And they found out filled and spiked with synthetic THC, synthetic marijuana, no CBD even in some of the products. They did the same thing in Florida. Over 1,000 devices were tested for CBD, and less than 10% of the devices had CBD in it. They had illicit drugs and synthetic drugs. Don't buy CBD in a gas station, okay? Don't buy it in a truck stop. If you want to use CBD, use a reputable company. If you want to know a reputable company, I'll give you 4 names of companies I have 0 affiliation with. I'll give you a name of a company I have affiliation with, fully transparent. If you want CBD and you believe CBD can help you for a medical issue, I'm all for it, fine. Just go to a vetted company. I'm talking about CBD. I'm not talking about THC, tetrahydrocannabinol. Your children are crucial, okay? They're 100% of our future. The cognitive function of their brain, with lead poisoning, with nickel poisoning, with THC, with nicotine. It affects the prefrontal cortex of the brain. It affects the psychological capacity. Your children are at risk if they use these devices, and in fairness to them, many of them don't think it's a problem. Many of them think it's harmless, it's safer than cigarettes, and it's not. There's something called CHS, cannabis hypermesis syndrome, and it's uncontrolled vomiting of the gastrointestinal system. It will absolutely affect children in a high way with high content THC. It's up 2,500% since 2009 among kids. CIP, cannabis-induced psychosis, is up 1,500% in 11 years. Something where the high THC blend will either mix with a psychiatric drug that the kid is on or another kind of medication that the kid is on, and it will induce psychosis. And we're seeing this. Emergency room admissions for 10 to 17 in 2020. Sorry, emergency room visits, not admissions. Emergency room visits for non-injury, so like mental health visits to the emergency room, from 7 to 14 jumped 24% in 2020. From 10 to 17 jumped 34%. Okay, it was massive. These kids are going to the hospital, and this is something that you're not hearing enough about. This kid thought it'd be real funny to put this controller that he turned into a smoking device on Snapchat, his Instagram, promoting it among high school, his peers. He had a massive problem, ended up in the hospital. There's a big study out of the UK about psychosis and marijuana, but pretty much the entire medical and the media in America is not even covering it. It's not even talking about it. I have to go to the Lancet or the UK to find studies on this psychosis because the people in America don't want to talk about it. They don't want to cover the story. Reynolds American, which is the second largest tobacco company in the world, they're moving into this. They own Views. They're pushing this out. They're marketing the vape as a cool, again, alternative. They're doing the exact same thing they started with to get kids using the products, to get young adults to using the products. This was a big study done in California. This kid said, everybody I know and hang out with vapes in Colorado. Everybody he knows. The study revealed that 1 in 4 are vaping in Colorado. 25% of every middle school and high school student in Colorado self-reports they're vaping. 25%. So think about that. If a kid's not going to tell truthfully in the survey, that's much, much higher. And your governor and many people in this state are considering medical marijuana. So I want to share something with you. Marijuana. There's no such thing as medical marijuana. There's just marijuana, okay? It's either recreational or medical, but there's not two different products. It's the same thing, okay? It's how it's sold, period. But this is Colorado. The blue is medical and the orange is recreation. So in 2012, the year before they went legal, it was all medical, right? Well, they go legal in 13, and 3 years later, it's almost half of the revenue is recreational. Not medical, recreational. You start with medical, you quickly, within 3 to 4 years, end up 50% medical, and then you quickly end up about 25% medical, 75% recreational. That's people smoking weed to get high. That's not someone who's smoking weed for glaucoma, okay? The lie of medical is just a slippery slope we travel down to get recreation. Medical is a ruse. If you want medical marijuana, cannabidiol, CBD1, CBD2, CBV, CBG, CBH, there's plenty of ways to get medical CBD, not legalizing smokable marijuana and selling it in dispensaries and getting doctors to say, oh yeah, smoke weed, it'll help you with your... No. The concern about teenage use of marijuana is very, very minimal, and I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, but let me come off of the marijuana, because sometimes people say, well, my kid would never vape marijuana, but yeah, they're vaping nicotine, okay. As I shared earlier, nicotine addiction is real, especially for kids, and there's no product to deal with it. This nurse, other people started asking me, there's a section on our website, steeritstraight.org, it says the no vape zone. Go there if you really want to understand some ways to deal with the cravings and nicotine cravings for a kid, for an adult. No vape zone. but I started putting this together. What am I going to tell people who are addicted to nicotine? So I went to Walmart and I found every product that they had. Lozenges, gum, patches, I found everything. I bought all the products. I had it all on a desk and I was studying it. And I turned the boxes around, and on the back of the box, every box had this directions. And it says, if you are under 18 years of age, ask a doctor before use. No studies have been done to show if the product will work for you. You know that paperwork on the inside of things that has all these warnings and everything that none of us ever read? We just hope nothing goes wrong, right? We hardly ever read those directions, right? When I got to those directions and I read the whole thing on pages and pages of stuff, it says no studies have been done to show if the product will work for you. No studies have been done for safety or efficacy for 18 years of age and younger. Meaning, this is a product, these are all products that have never been tested on a child. If your kid's addicted to a product that they're not supposed to be using in the first place, are you going to turn to a product that's never been tested on a kid to help your kid get off of a product that they should have been on in the first place? What are we going to do for our children? What are we going to do to help them get off nicotine? So I was on CBS Morning News, January 2019, year before COVID, right? And I was with the Commissioner of Health from New York, and the host of CBS Morning News said to the Commissioner about a final statement. And he said, vaping among teens and kids threatens 5 decades of public health gains. And so she says, okay, we'll be right back after this commercial. I was like, hold on a second, hold on. And she's like, shh. And the producer's telling me to be quiet because they hadn't broke from the set, right? Went to commercial, but they didn't go fast enough, right? And so I was screaming and they're telling me to shut up. And so finally they went to commercial and said, sir, we weren't broken yet. We didn't need you to pipe in, right? I said, did you hear what he said? She says, what? The commissioner, did you hear what he just said? She goes, I think so. He said 50 years of public health gains is being thrown out the window right now because of teens and kids vaping. And you went to a commercial break. She goes, we have a time schedule. A time schedule. Oh, good. We wouldn't want to go over the time schedule. 50 years of progress in our health community is being thrown out the window because of vaping. And you went to a commercial. I need you to understand something. My wife calls me Danny now. I get it, right? I bring the bad news. I'm like the alarmist, right? I promise you, I'm dealing with this. A year ago, 3 kids a week called the suicide helpline. Now 5 and 6 call a night, and that's just me. There's over 300 people taking calls across the country every single night, over 300, right? It's a massive problem. You're having less of a problem in Kansas because you people are the smartest in the country. You got your kids in school. This school district, I'm not saying it because I'm here, they're brilliant. They have your kids in school. Man, it's the best thing that could possibly happen. And you still have problems in this community. You still got kids vaping. You got middle schools and high school kids, students drinking, smoking weed, using vaping products. We have to have conversations about it. We have to have conversations about it. And you've got to have these conversations with your kid. And your kids have to believe what we're telling them. I want to close with this. The top 5 causes of death, 15 to 24 years of age. Top 5 causes of death in America, right? Accidents is number 1. Number 1 cause of death for kids is accidents, 15 to 24. 1/3 of those accidents, they say, of all death to teenagers, number 1 cause is accidental death. 1/3 of them are in a motor vehicle, are in a car. Now, that's untrue. That comes from the CDC. And I'm going to tell you, the CDC is not giving all the information because 2/3 of those deaths are in a car. The 1/3 is the driver. They don't count the passenger and the kid in the back seat. 2/3 of every teen, 15 to 24, who dies in this country, 2/3 of them are in a car. And 60% of those drivers are under the influence of drugs and alcohol. Suicide's the number 2 cause of death, 15 to 24. I've never been involved in an adolescent suicide that wasn't drug and alcohol related. Illicit drugs, alcohol, or a psychiatric drug, a pharmaceutical drug, an antidepressant, an anti-anxiety medication, drugs, suicide. Number 3 is homicide. People don't understand that, realize that. 15 to 24 for African Americans, that's number 1, homicide. Number 3 cause of death, 15 to 24 in our country, is homicide. I've never seen an adolescent homicide, victim or shooter or stabber. I've never seen an adolescent homicide that wasn't drug and alcohol related, ever. And the number 4 cause of death for kids, 15 to 24, is drug overdose or alcohol poisoning. So when people say to me, Michael, the number 4 cause of death for kids is alcohol and drugs, I say, no, it's not. It's 1, it's 2, it's 3, and it's 4. That's what's killing our kids, drugs and alcohol. And I'm telling you, this is an amazing school who allowed me to come in here today, but there are schools in this country, there's school districts in this country that give kids a flash of drugs education every week in October. They call it Red Ribbon Week. They throw some information out there to kids about drugs, and that's the parents' problem. Yeah, it's the parents' problem. It's law enforcement heroes' problem. It's our clergy's problem. It's our school's problem. It's our community's problem. It's all of our problem. This is all of our problem. The top 4 causes of death for the future of our country is drugs and alcohol, and we're barely talking about it. So, vaping, I want to show you something. I started looking at this, and in 2000, I started really going back. In 2014, I started really going back and studying it, and I got the numbers all the way to the year 2000. Remember I showed you that chart of how people die in America, and the number 3 cause of death was respiratory disorders? Well, the number 16 cause of death, 15 to 24, was respiratory disorders 20 years ago. Number 16. 10 years later, as the vape was introduced in 09, this started to escalate. As smoking was going up, as weed use was going up among adolescents, 15 to 24, it jumped from 16 to 10 in 10 years. Now it's number 6. It's number 6, respiratory disorders. COPD, CLRD, acute respiratory distress syndrome. It's number 6 for children 15 to 24. Why? I believe why is marijuana and vaping. That's what I believe. So I made this film, Marijuana X. It's on YouTube. It's 54 minutes. I urge you to watch it. I urge you to watch all of our movies. Kids Are Dying, American Epidemic, Marijuana X. I made an amazing movie on recovery from addiction because I want to talk about that hope. It's called On the Road to Recovery. And then I'm making my first Christian film. It comes out next month. It's called Higher Power. And I have 2 more films after that. All of them are on our website. I'm on social media. If profanity bothers you, probably shouldn't follow me. I'm really crazy sometimes because I try not to use profanity too much. I really do. My wife goes behind me and changes the words because there's kids that are following me, and I don't like you. I get so mad. I get so angry because kids are dying. This is not a minor issue. This is not a trivial thing. This is real. We're talking about life and death. And I'm going crazy. So you want to follow Steered Straight or you want to follow me on Facebook? I got 2 pages because, it's a long story. I got 2 pages and you can follow, and every day I'm trying to put up information about why it's so important that we listen and why we really address this and what you need to know. So this book, I'm telling you, I tell people this all the time, and people call us and people write in. If $20 is more than you got, don't worry about it. Just call and say you need the book, and I'll send it to you. I don't care about the money. I need the money to help fund what we're doing, but if you need this book and you don't have $20, we'll send it to you for free. But if you can order this book, you can go on Amazon right now. Right on your phone, you go to Amazon and order it. Go ahead, I'll order it. I'm just kidding. So if you want to order it, that was funnier in my head. Please order the book. You can go to our website and order it. You can call the redhead, at our office, my wife, and you can order it. I urge you to get this book. I urge you to download the Success Curriculum. It's free of charge. Now, drugfreeworld.org, drugfreeworld.org, and there's links on our website. You can get booklets and you can take courses free of charge in 32 different languages. You can, in Chinese and Swahili, in German, in French, and Spanish, 32 different languages, free of charge. You can take whole courses on drugfreeworld.org to get more educated about drugs. I have so much information that I'm trying to amass and get it out there. Anything I can do to help, any question I can answer. I want to go to every school in Kansas. I want to go to every school across the country. I want to share with these kids the reality of what happened to me, how I grew up, why I ended up where I ended up, and what I'm doing to to prevent it from happening to your kids. You have to have the conversations. The more you know, the better off you're going to be. The more you know, the more equipped you are. And your kids need to know as well. So I really appreciate you coming out here tonight. I really appreciate you watching from home if you couldn't make it. Please talk to your students, 4th through 12th grade that saw the presentation. The 4th, 5th, and 6th grade was one presentation. The 7th through 12th grade was a completely different presentation, because there's some things I want to talk to high school students that I don't want to talk to elementary school students about, and so that's what happened today. And I'm so grateful to have the opportunity. I'm so grateful to your school district. I'm really grateful to your social worker. That girl is amazing, and she's great. I tell you something else I pointed out to her, not to put her on the spot, but I was using the restroom, and there's a sign in the restroom with a link that kids can use their phone if they want to talk to her. I promise you, 708 schools I did in 2019, less than 10% of the schools across the country that I visited have something like that in their restroom. Trust me, I use the restroom in every school that I go to. Less than 10% of the schools across the country do this. It's incredible. We have an amazing social worker and an amazing counselor here. We had a lot of teachers this afternoon attend a presentation. You got a cool principal here, boy. I mean, he's cool. And he brought me in. I appreciate it. We got a couple minutes. I want to see if anyone has any questions. And please ask a question, because probably someone at home has the same question. If you have a question about everything I've talked about, anything I talked about, I guarantee someone at home has the same question. So you're asking, it can help someone at home as well. Does anyone have any questions? Don't be shy. Just ask. Just raise your hand. Who's the first question? No question. Everything I talked about, you have no questions. Nobody's got a question? Could you pretend to have a question? Yes, sir.
Do you see a lot of the, like methamphetamine or any of the other ones in the schools when talking with kids?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot more methamphetamine in schools. Again, I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, but I'm very concerned about having a different approach to China than we've had for the last 3 to 4 years. I'm very concerned. China is manufacturing something called yaba in red and blue pills. Remember a movie with a red and blue pill? So China's making these pills called yaba, and it's methamphetamine in a pill. It's like an Adderall, but it's coming through Mexico, it's coming through Canada, it's coming through borders of Canada, it's coming into through Oregon, through Washington State, through California ports. It's methamphetamine in a pill. The scariest thing about that to me is, it's one thing to shoot up meth, it's one thing to smoke meth, but if you could put meth in a pill and pop it, the ingestion method's a lot easier, it's a lot more discreet, it scares me. And I'm seeing those pills in a lot of different places, all across the country. So I'd say 2014, 2015, 2016, if I had a student in a, they line up and ask questions at the end, or I'm there all day usually at a school district, and sometimes they can get to me and ask questions or ask the counselor to sit down with us. Once in a while I would deal with meth or heroin in high school, and then 2017, 2018, I started to see a lot of meth in high school, a lot of heroin in middle school. I've been to 4 overdose funerals for 12-year-olds. 4. 12-year-old. How does a 12-year-old overdose on heroin? How does a 12-year-old even get on heroin, right? It's a new reality, but I'm starting to see it more and more. Meth is exploding. Meth is exploding. And the reason why so much heroin users overdosed over the past 3 years is because most of the heroin in this country is laced with fentanyl. Fentanyl is coming in from China. Now, about 60 to 80% of our meth is laced with fentanyl. I don't know if anybody, I have a very good friend who's a very well-known Christian artist who just lost his son last year to methamphetamine laced with fentanyl at 21 years of age in Nashville, Tennessee. One of the most famous Christian artists in the entire world lost his 21-year-old son to meth laced with fentanyl. It's happening all over the place. So meth is exploding, exploding. Sad that it's kids, Kids. Great question. Anyone? Who's next? Next question. Is it, yes ma'am?
Is there some type of behaviors that
parents should watch for? I'm sure that, the books and stuff say there's something little, I don't know, something.
So there's a couple things on the website under resources, it says parents, and there's actually a thing what to look for. There's a whole thing there. But one of the things you need to look for is a change in behavior. Sometimes people think a negative change in behavior, but sometimes a positive, unexplained change in behavior could be a sign as well. All of a sudden, they're cleaning the house and they're much more active and they're much more talkative. That's a change in behavior. A change in behavior. Okay, withdrawing, pulling back, new friends, less time with the friends that they've normally been spending time with, sports, extracurricular activities, less involved in that, less talkative. You're gonna see change in hygiene. If a girl normally gets up 4 hours before school and tries on every outfit in her closet and really concerned about how she looks, and then now she's getting up 15 minutes before school starts and throwing on anything and not putting on makeup, which I wish kids didn't use makeup, but not putting on anything, just running to school, not concerned about her appearance or his appearance, but withdrawing is one of the biggest signs. Grade changing, things like that. Unexplained money, having money, no reason, or things missing. What happened to your PlayStation? I don't know, it's at Johnny's house, or things missing. These are obvious signs. But early on, especially with the nicotine, irritability, really irritable, snapping, where they never snapped before, getting frustrated, I was talking to a kid a couple weeks ago, and they knew that the younger brother they used to love to do puzzles. They sat down at the table and did puzzles all the time. And now the kid who loved the puzzles is getting frustrated because they can't find pieces and they're throwing things. Like, what the heck is wrong with this kid, right? And he was vaping. He was in the 7th grade, he was vaping. And what happened was his vape got confiscated and he didn't have his vape. And so he's real irritable because he couldn't get his vape. And then all of a sudden he got another vape and he was doing puzzles, but then he was always going upstairs and he was irritable. So it was a sign, a major sign. You've gotta, I tell parents all the time, you can get this on our website, drug tests. Here's the thing that I tell parents all the time, drug test your kids. I don't care if 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, you don't have any reason to drug test them, you don't think they're on drugs, just drug test them, because here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna drug test your kids, and they're gonna tell all their friends that their parents drug test them, right? And a lot of times, kids will be like, yeah, I can't do drugs. You're giving them an escape mechanism. So if someone says, yo man, after school I'm gonna smoke some weed, your 7th grade daughter's gonna be like, yeah, my mother is nuts. She's crazy. She drug tests me. I get random drug tested, and I'm in the 7th grade. I'm a cheerleader, for crying out loud. What would I be doing drugs for? But my parent drug tests me. So how can I do drugs if she tests me and I get positive for drugs? I'll lose everything. I'll lose my iPhone 14, and I need my iPhone 14. I'm in the 7th grade, right? So it's gonna give the kids an escape mechanism. Well, there's not an iPhone 14, right? It's something like, is it on 12 or something? I don't know. But anyway, the kids are gonna be able to answer their friends and give them another reason why they wouldn't do drugs. Hey, you want to get high after school? No. Why? I don't know. I get drug tested at home, and if I get caught, I'm busted. I'm not doing it. I never know when the drug test is coming, right? And if you're not going to drug test your kids, just tell them you're going to drug test them, and tell your kids. I don't advocate lying, okay? But just tell your kids to say to their friends, if they ever get approached for drugs, that your parents drug test you, just tell them that. They don't know. Just tell them that you get drug tested. And that'll be a way that you can answer them so you don't do drugs, right? On our website, we have a drug test where if you don't want to drug test your kids, I have parents say, I don't want to invade their privacy. Who pays the bills here? Just ask them, right? But anyway, you don't want your kids to think you don't trust them. You don't want to drug test your kids. Fine. Drug test their area. We have surface tests. They're $2.50. You want to find out if marijuana's been anywhere near their phone? You want to find out if marijuana's been on their desk drawer? I mean, not a year ago, it won't be there. But in the last 7 days, you can surface test your kid's PlayStation. You can surface test their desk in their room. You can surface test their phone. and then rub it on the panel. If it turns a certain color, I have THC tests, heroin tests, cocaine tests, and methamphetamine tests. So you can find out if it's right. You want to find out if THC is in a vape? I had a father do this the other day. His 17-year-old son vapes, and he approves of it. The father approves of it. It's better than smoking. I go, okay, it's really not, but anyway. How do you know he's not vaping THC? Oh, my son would never vape THC. Okay, buy a surface test and test the vape. Just rub it on the inside of the vape, rub the panel. If it turns red, you got THC in that vape. He did it, you rub the panel, THC in the vape. Found out the kid was vaping THC, vaping marijuana. So you can test the surface of an area. It's not 100% accurate, and it has to have been there in the last 5 to 7 days, but buying multiple tests and tests on an ongoing basis. It's better to know than not know at all. But I recommend every parent drug test their kids starting in the 6th grade. Because it's an escape mechanism for your children. Anybody else? Yes?
Where are a lot of the kids getting, I know like alcohol, you can have older people buy them and things, but where are they, are they ordering them, or where are majority of them getting them?
So getting which?
The pins.
Okay.
The stuff to put in, and I'm like, where are they buying?
So I was at this place in Vermont, and it was a big dispensary store. One of the pictures that I shared with all the different flavors was in Vermont, right? So I was there, it was like 4:30 in the afternoon, and I was talking to the guy. I was buying a couple things that I never saw before, and I wanted to study it, and I was there talking to him. And he had about 100 boxes being shipped out. They had a big cart there, it was going shipped out. And I was just looking at the boxes. And UPS came in to pick all those boxes up. And I was looking at the boxes, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee. Okay, it's all, going out. It was nicotine, it was vape. It wasn't marijuana, it was vape, right? And I said, oh, you ship all over the country? He says, yeah, man, our website's really blowing up. I said, okay. How do you know kids aren't getting any of this stuff? And he goes, oh, we asked the person how old they are when they ordered it. Oh, good, because a kid would never lie and say they were 21, right? They're shipping it all over the country. And the same thing that's happening at the marijuana places in Colorado and Nevada and Massachusetts, these stores are shipping it out. They don't care if the kid is. And here's the problem. Law enforcement, I think in this country, we just rely on these heroes to solve all our criminal justice problems, our crime problems, our drug problems. They can't. They can't. We shouldn't expect them to solve all the problems, right? We have to help them. We have to help them, right? These products of THC can get sent through the mail and through FedEx, through UPS, through the Postal Service, and nobody knows. A canine dog can't hit on some of these concentrates, these liquids. A canine dog's not trained to hit on these products. Especially in the states where marijuana is legal, they train the canines not to hit on marijuana. So if we're training the canine dogs not to hit on marijuana, but we're sending marijuana through the mail, we're not going to stop it. It's not supposed to go, it's not legally supposed to go, but it's going. So kids are getting these prepaid cards, and they can put money on the prepaid card and they can order it. Some of the websites are making sure you upload your driver's license, right? And that you're 21. Of course, no kid can get an older person to help them out, right? But it's getting shipped through the mail, marijuana and the vaping. Now, I showed you those two brothers in Wisconsin. They were sending it out all illegally. They were making millions of dollars a month. They had 12 employees. They were sending out millions of dollars of marijuana, all on the internet, black market you call it, but on the dark web. It's very easy to order this stuff right online, but some of it's getting shipped through the Postal Service and UPS. And then I don't know if you ever heard of these guys called drug dealers. They tend to sell to whoever wants to buy the drugs. So that's unfortunate. I'm sure there's no drug addicts in Kinsley, Kansas. Edwards County doesn't have any drug dealers or drug addicts, right? None, not a one. Good. They're in those other counties. It's here, but you have to live your life drug-free. And you have to have your peer group live their life drug-free. What you do at 21, I wish you waited even longer, but what you do at 21, I have no opinion on it, right? Personal opinion, if you want to talk, I want you to wait, but especially with drugs, never. Vaping, smoking, never. Alcohol, say please not. But if you want to choose that at 21 or even older, that's for you to choose responsibly. But even then, it's got to be responsible. But as a kid, as a young adult, in middle school or high school, you can't even entertaining. Anybody else? Yes?
You obviously give a lot of these talks all over the country, so I'm curious what your take was, how open or receptive our kids were.
All right, well, first of all, I couldn't wait to get to Kansas because I wanted to take a picture at Midway and take a picture that I was halfway between San Francisco and New York. I was excited as heck. Secondly, I think the dude dropped in last night, and I love that place. I love this place. Here's what I said. I love the dude dropped in. I'm sorry, it was great. I loved it. I went to Steve today, right? And ate. We had a beautiful conversation. Got to meet your husband now. I went to the antique store downtown. Listen, I love places like this. Honestly, if I could have a plane that could get me out of here to different places that I have to go and not drive 2 hours to Wichita or whatever, I would rather live in Kinsley, Kansas than a place like
My
this.
husband's a pilot, we could arrange something.
Fine, listen, and listen, the dude drops in for sale, so and I text her, seriously, my wife wouldn't care where she does love Nashville, but anyway, she can stay there and I'll stay in Kansas. I tell the kids, the 7th through the 12th graders today, I told them this, you're so much better off, and a lot of the kids won't believe this, you're so much better off growing up here than you are in many places across this country. Kansas, the middle of the country, the absolute middle of the country, right? This beautiful rural place, small school where the principal and the social worker and everybody knows you, where everybody knows. Sometimes people say, oh, that's the worst place to grow up. No, it's the best place to grow up, right? And I'm saying that for a reason. I told them that because I believe it. I grew up in a small place just like this, and it happened to me. It's happening everywhere, everywhere. I got to talk to, I think, 6 parents today on all the breaks. I ran all over town, the grandparents and the parents. I got to chance to talk to a lot of people. And everyone tells me the same thing, this person, that person. I sat with a person at the store down here, the consignment store, who had moved back home and had years and years and years of addiction, and he's here. There's an AA meeting in Kinsley on Monday, there's an NA meeting in Kinsley on Tuesday, and then Dodge City's the rest of the week. So that's what I do when I go to a place like this, man. I learn as much as I can about where I am because I want to talk with like that authority and that knowledge, okay? And so one of my favorite mentors of my life, his name is Zig Ziglar, and he said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And it's especially true for kids. Kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Once a kid knows you care, then they'll listen to you, right? These kids it shocked me that so many kids were easily in 7th through 12th grade, like I said. In the 7th and the 8th grade, that's where all your honesty is. Really surprising how many kids were so comfortable about saying how they know kids that are addicted to vaping, that they know middle school and high school kids are drinking alcohol, they know middle and high school kids are drinking and smoking weed or vaping. It's prevalent. It's very, very prevalent. But that doesn't mean Kinsley or Edwards County, it's Edwards County, right, is a higher concentration than the county I was in Missouri last week or the county I'm going to be in Nebraska next week. Rural America. I was sharing with the social worker today, I was in an Amish community in Scott County, Indiana. It's got a massive heroin overdose problem. We're talking about Amish people. I didn't even know they went to the doctor, right? And they go on opioids and they get on heroin. And like, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And it's all of our job. I love what Laura Bush said. These kids are 25% of our population, but they're 100% of our future. We have to get to these kids, but I promise you, this is a tight-knit community, and these kids are thirsting for information. They want to know. They believe you. We have to have these conversations. We have to have talks. It's here. It's prevalent. I'll tell you, it was more prevalent for a rural community than many rural communities that I go to, but not in the top 20%. But it's definitely up over half, for sure. The amount of kids. I asked probably 20 questions, 25 questions, and getting hands raised. You know, I gauged that on 7th through 12th grade. Not so much on 4th through 6th. Because you can ask 4th through 6th graders, how many of your parents have been to the moon? And you're gonna get 60% of the kids raise their hand. And then when the 4th grade friend raises her hand, you raise your hand too. I gauged it on 7th through 12th, but I gauged it mostly on 7th and 8th. And it's here, it's prevalent. It really, really, really is prevalent. And your kids will tell you. They'll tell you. So Don't ever ask, if you want to find out if your kids are vaping or you want to find out if your kids are drinking, don't ask them if they are. And don't ask them if their close-knit friends are either. Go outside of that group and ask them about the kids that are in the school that are not the really close friends. You know, those friends, those other ones, because they'll be honest about them. And then bring it back in with questions, you know? So start at the fringe, the kids that you know, they're in your school, but they're not your friends' friends. You don't hang out with them. Start asking about that. And then you'll come into your friends. And then you can find out more about them, you know? That's the way I tell parents to ask questions. Okay, anybody else? I really appreciate it. I'll give you out my card. If you're watching from home, steeredstraight.org, the website's there, my email's there. You can call me. I'm married to the sexiest redhead on planet Earth. You can call her. She lived through hell married to me, and she is a master's level therapist, family marriage counselor. Isn't that crazy? I'm married to a marriage counselor. But you can ask her questions anytime. You can email us. Anything you want to know, any advice that we could give you. If you know someone that's struggling, that needs treatment, we work with so many places around the country, 90% of them that don't need insurance to go to, and we don't make any money off of it. We'll help anybody that we can. Drug-Free World will provide you with so much information on drugs, but our website, steeredstraight.org, is the best place to start. It'll give you information that you need to further and continue this education. It's vital. Please don't stop learning. Don't let your kids stop learning. Enhance those protective factors. Eliminate the risk factors. And again, I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much for letting me share with you guys. Thank you.